After living in Spain for 30 days with my family, here are the things that most surprise me. Now, to set this straight, I have three little children who are 2 years old, 3 years old, and 4 years old. I also have my wife, who's an executive, and we're fortunate that we're able to travel with our au pair as well. Now, I've traveled to Spain a handful of times over the past 25 years, but this is the first time I've traveled with my family. And let me tell you, traveling with family is a completely different scenario, and I've learned a lot of new lessons from it. Number one, here's the big thing. I was scared about the flight across the Atlantic. We were flying from Phoenix, we had a layover in Atlanta, and then we had a long 8 hour stretch across the Atlantic. I have had some horrible experiences before with my kids crying over long flights to New York. I thought that after flying to Atlanta for 5 hours and then a 3 hour layover by the Atlantic flight, they were going to be done. To my surprise, that was actually not the case. Besides for a little bit of crying on the first flight, by the time our layover passed in Georgia and we were crossing the Atlantic, they slept most of the flight and they barely even cried once. So the thing that I was most afraid of actually turned out to be one of the least things I had to worry about. The second thing, which relates directly to that, is I did not anticipate how jet lag would affect our children. It's a 6 hour time difference between here and the East Coast, and that makes it 9 hours to Phoenix. And, those first few nights, it was a real struggle because 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, our kids wanted to play. They couldn't understand why we were trying to get them to go to sleep. They wanted to jump around the hotel room. And it was a challenge. It was a challenge dealing with temper tantrums at 3 o'clock in the morning. And honestly, it lasted for almost 2 weeks before we really got the jet lag under control. And part of it was our fault as parents as well, because when we're up until 3 o'clock with our kids trying to get them to go to sleep, then we don't want to wake up early the next morning. We want to sleep in while they're sleeping in. And so we kind of ended up in this vicious cycle where the whole family would be up late. We'd sleep in late till like noon, and we didn't get onto like a decent schedule until probably halfway into the trip. And I should mention our trip, we started in Madrid. We spent a week in Madrid. Then we came down to Valencia, where we're at now. And then we're going to spend about another week exploring the south, go down to the Alhambra and Granada, go down to Malaga and see some of the other country before headed back. And all in all, our family summer in Spain is about, I think, like 36 or 37 days total. The other thing, which I didn't expect, which actually maybe contributed to our challenges with jet lag, is that in Spain, the culture is to eat out very, very late. Most restaurants don't open for dinner until 8 o'clock. And so it's very common to go to a restaurant at 9 o'clock or so and stay there for 2 or 3 hours. And so we would go eat at like 9 o'clock at night and be at a restaurant until 10:30 or so. And that certainly didn't help with our jet lag when we were getting back to the hotel at like 11 o'clock or midnight. And although that sounds incredibly late given American standards, in Spain, it's actually very normal to eat out late at night. And that goes back to a few different reasons. One is they like to take siestas here because in the heat of the day, businesses would just shut down during the heat of the day. And then they'd have their big afternoon lunch. Then they go back to their houses for a little bit, and then they pick up work at like 5 or 6 o'clock at night. And then they work until about 8 o'clock at night when they all go out to dinner. The other thing about going out to dinner here is there's no rush to make it through your meal. And so lots of times as a family, we sit down, we have a tapa, have a drink, wait a little bit, have another tapa, wait a little bit, have another tapa. And so dinner and most meals are usually these kind of longer, drawn out processes, which is actually really beautiful because you get to spend a lot of time just sitting and talking. Most of the time, restaurants have outdoor seating in the evening. Again, another reason why dinner is so late is because since most restaurants are seating outside, you can't really seat outside in the heat of the day, and it doesn't cool down until about 8 o'clock at night after the sun goes down. Actually, the sun goes down about 9 o'clock at night. So you don't start eating until 8 o'clock at night because it's too hot to sit outside these restaurants before then. But sitting outside a restaurant as a family, it's beautiful because usually there's plazas or places where the kids can go and run and play. So it's very common here for people to be sitting outside of a restaurant and the kids are out running and playing. When the food comes, they call the kids back. The kids come, sit down, eat, and then they go back to play while the adults just sit around and talk. I mean, it's kind of like traditionally what you imagine in the United States of like eating outside in your backyard or barbecuing or grilling, where all the adults are sitting around talking, the kids just come to eat and go out back to playing right afterwards. It's kind of like that same type of feeling, except in a restaurant plaza type city environment, and it's really unique and quite different, especially given the fast-paced go 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 American culture. So speaking of sitting outside, this is one of the first times that our whole family has lived in a city. I mean, we have an apartment that we rented for a month. We're living in the city. We walk in most places, take public transportation. And if you have never had a toddler living in the city, I, you know, what I don't even know how to describe it. If you're a germaphobe, just you can't do it because our kids are running, they're dropping things in the street on the sidewalk, they're picking them up, like they've been infatuated with balloons lately. So they just keep blowing up these balloons and they'll drop the balloon on the sidewalk and then pick it up and put it back in their mouth. And me and their mother like, no, stop, let us rinse it off beforehand. And we can't catch them in time. And it's definitely a challenge to get over our fear of germs and try as we can to tell them not to put their hands in their mouth after touching the floor in the city streets and all that stuff. It like it's a never ending battle. Fortunately, Madrid and Valencia are both really clean cities comparatively. There's really no trash out. And so it's not as bad as necessarily like New York City, but it is still like a never ending battle. We're always trying to put hand sanitizer on their hands, always trying to wash their hands. And fortunately, knock on wood, no one in the family has gotten sick yet, thank goodness. But that has been a unique challenge of city living. And speaking of the city being clean, it's been really interesting because, you go to like downtown Phoenix, you go to Manhattan, and there's just police everywhere, especially in Manhattan these days. I mean, there's multiple police on every single corner. Here, we've rarely ever seen a police officer. We don't really feel like there's a high crime rate. There's very little homeless or poverty or panhandlers that we see. And I don't really know what the reason for it is. I I mean, Spain is a socialist democracy. And, it's just funny. Mandani just won New York City, and there's, people like Bernie Sanders and AOC that advocate for social democracy. And, it's funny that their opponents like think like socialism is so bad, right? But here in Spain, which is a socialist democracy, similar to what some of those political figures aspire to build, I really do feel like there is more of a social safety net, less poverty, more social services. I mean, the parks here have just been absolutely beautiful. Some of the most spectacular parks I've ever been in. I mean, we come to this park every single day, and there's botanical gardens that are all free, fountains, children playgrounds, and I don't know if like I don't fully understand how the economy and political structure all relate to that, but I'll just say that there is a very noticeable difference. And for being a socialist democracy, like many people, you grow up hearing this word socialism as like this evil thing. But when you're actually here, it doesn't feel that evil. Now, the flip side, though, is you also don't feel like there's this, at least I haven't felt this like overwhelming capitalism, entrepreneurs, kind of innovativism. And, granted, I'm not going to startup meetings or business meetings or things like that, but, walking around a city like Phoenix or New York, you kind of, I don't know, I feel like this entrepreneurial energy more than I feel here. I don't necessarily feel like that same level of energy. And maybe these are all stories I'm just telling myself in my head. All this to say that it's very different and it's beautiful in its own way. Another really important thing I learned about living in Spain for a month with my family is that you need to take the kids to the playground at least once, if not twice a day. I mean, they go stir crazy in the apartment. They're not in school. At school, they used to play all the time. And so, really taking them to the playground, getting them intentional time outdoors multiple times a day is super important. When I used to come visit as a single guy, and even when I used to visit with just me and my spouse beforehand, we used to spend most of our times going to churches and museums and going to shows. And here we have seen very little churches or museums, but we have seen so many playgrounds, more playgrounds than I can count. And it's been really wonderful to engage in that experience with our children. One of the interesting things I learned about Spain, actually, the first time I visited 25 years ago, is the history of my religion at the time, which was Catholicism, Christianity. And I grew up my whole life as a devout Catholic Christian until I visited Spain. Now, I was probably questioning it before then, but when I really visited Spain and I started learning about the history of Catholicism here and how Queen Elizabeth persecuted Jews and the Moors and the whole Spanish Inquisition. And then when I saw all these beautiful buildings and cathedrals and chapels, and you look at the dates on those, and most of these magnificent golden buildings and palaces were all constructed at the same time that Spain was actively engaging in the slave trade and the persecution of my indigenous ancestors. It really made me question this whole idea of Christianity and Catholicism, and how can a country that is so devoutly Catholic, especially back then, do so much evil in the world and be so bigoted against other cultures and religions. And I won't go down that rabbit hole too much, but I would just say that it's been an interesting experience because I am Spanish. My DNA is 50% Andalusian Spain and 25% African and 15% indigenous and another 5 or 10% of a few other different things. And so this country is my ethnic heritage, but so is Africa and the slave trade, and so is the indigenous people that were wiped out in the Caribbean. And coming to terms with how all those different cultures have merged and blended over the time and learning to appreciate the beauty in all of them while also understanding that most of them have some of their own faults has been an interesting journey in self-discovery for myself. And frequently I meet people, especially of similar heritage as myself, that look to European culture as the colonizer, as the evil people that, captured slaves and killed indigenous people, while ignoring that that culture is also part of themselves. I think coming to terms with that for me has been a wonderful experience that I hope other people can, come to terms with as well, especially that people are still struggling with dealing with those conflicting emotions about their cultural heritage. Another beautiful thing about living in Spain, this is actually something really beautiful that my daughter Sky shared with me. I took Sky to go see a church the other day, and I was trying to explain to her, this 4-year old, what God is and how God lives in everything. And God lives in the trees and in the earth and in her, and how sometimes people call God a he, sometimes people call God a she, but it can be anything she wants it to be. And she replied that God is a unicorn. At least her God is a unicorn. It's a she, she's a girl, and her name is Rainbow. And I thought, man, that is so beautiful because I think really it's all of our responsibilities to explore our own idea of what spirituality is. And we should all define God for ourselves and not let anyone define it for us. Most of us have lived in societies where God was defined for them their whole entire lives. I think when you're young, that makes sense because you may not necessarily know how to develop these ideas. But I think most of us get to a point in life where we realize that no, like I get to decide what my God is, and I get to decide if I want to believe in Christianity or Jesus or non duality or Hinduism or make something up completely uniquely their own. I'm a chaplain at Heart Space Church. We practice psilocybin as our sacrament of communion. We follow the teachings of Jesus in the synaptic gospels. We follow the teachings of Ram Dass as well. And it's uniquely my spiritual beliefs. And I don't necessarily try to force my beliefs on anyone else, right? Like my whole entire faith, my whole entire religion, so to speak, Heart Space Church, is just my beliefs. And if other people want to come and join and participate and learn about my beliefs and my spiritual practices, they're welcome to. But I don't force those beliefs on anyone else. And nor do I think that it's the only way to find divinity. And hearing my daughter Sky share that her God is a unicorn named Rainbow really brought joy to my heart that at such a young age, my daughter's already learning to define God how she wants to define God and not let anyone else define it for her. And I hope that she continues down that path for the rest of her life. The final thing I learned about living in Spain with my family is how to overcome your own subconscious. What does it take to travel to Spain with your whole entire family, 3 kids and 3 adults, for an entire month? Well, first off, I think it takes a lot of courage. I know some people may focus on the finances, but surprisingly, the cost of living here actually is probably much less than the United States. I mean, meals, dining out, rent, all that stuff is like 30 to 50% less than the United States. Don't get me wrong, traveling with a family can still be expensive, but I truly think that the biggest challenge for most people is not the finances, it is getting over the subconscious. And it's getting over these ideas and stories that we have about what we can and can't do. So many of us grew up taking a 1 week vacation once a year. And many of us still live in this mindset that a vacation only can be a week or only can be 2 weeks. And that when we do take a vacation, we need to go and see as much of the world as we can. We need to spend 2 days in Madrid, 2 days in Valencia, 2 days in Barcelona, and just do this windshield tour of all the hotspots of the country, barely getting to know any of those places that they visit. And getting over that mindset is very difficult. Being able to say, no, I'm going to go live in Spain for a month or 3 months or 6 months, or I'm going to go buy a one-way ticket and never come back until I feel like it, takes a lot of courage. It takes intentional exercises in reprogramming your subconscious mind to believe that you can actually do those things. And one technique that I have that I use to overcome my limiting beliefs, especially when it comes to like things like travel, is I use the acronym SEE. So like when you talk about goals, you may have heard of SMART goals before, which SMART goals are supposed to be specific, measurable, action oriented, relevant, time oriented. When you're talking about big life changes, I personally believe that SMART goals actually work against you. Because if you say you want to go visit some foreign place for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and you start saying, okay, well, what are the specifics? How am I going to measure it? What action items do I need to do? And you start getting caught up in all these things you need to do to make that happen. But if you never affect or change your subconscious is going to sabotage you that whole entire way that you were working with your SMART goals. So instead, the practice I use is C. So when you want to do something big, make a specific event that you envision yourself doing. E for exceptional. So if you're thinking about, let's say, going to go visit Spain, don't just say you want to go to see a museum in Spain. Don't just make it something mundane. Make it something exceptional. Like, I want to go watch the sunset in a vineyard or olive field, or I want to go see a live flamenco show. Make it something that for you is truly exceptional. And when you orient your future goals and visions with this framework, what you're doing is you are starting to program your subconscious into accepting this. So your subconscious, believe it or not, doesn't know the difference between past, present, or future. And so as you start to envision this event and articulate the feelings that you think you will feel during this event, your subconscious will start to program itself around this event and around making this event a reality. And so for me, one of my C goals for this trip was this is weird. I wanted to eat tapas with my family at 10 o'clock at night while my children run around and play in the plaza, and I would feel contentment and love. And this is an odd one because last time I was here, I remember as a single guy in my 20s, I remember thinking how like weird it was that 10 o'clock at night, families were out eating dinner and their children were playing in the plaza. And it was an experience I had never felt before. And so returning with my family, that was one of the goals I had envisioned for myself. That was actually the number one goal I had envisioned for me and my family to experience. And I think anchoring this trip on that vision helped bring this vision into reality. And there's been multiple times now during this trip where I've experienced that same exact thing that I envisioned years ago. And it's just been beautiful. And it causes me to stop and pause and reflect and think, oh yeah, this is the moment. This right now is the moment that I have been dreaming of for years. Seeing Sky play with her water balloons, Ray on the swing, Rio flirting with this other 2-year-old girl, all while me, Issa, and Zaira ate tapas and drank wine at 10 o'clock at night. It was just in that moment that I was like, this is it. This is why we came to Spain for a month. And I think at the end of the day, having the ability, I'm so blessed to have the ability to travel overseas for this period of time. I'm blessed to have the ability for me and my wife both to work remotely and to be able to cut back our hours too. We only work like less than probably 10, less than 10 or 15 hours per week. Zaire and her business and me doing contract work while we're here. And so the ability to be able to cut back, to have the financial resources to do that has been a true blessing. And it's an experience that me and my family will absolutely never forget. And I don't think it's an experience that it would have not nearly been the same if this was just a 1 week vacation where we rushed through Spain. Really, like, coming out here, taking our time for 35-ish days now has allowed us to see Spain in a whole different way and learn about our family and ourselves in a whole different way. And it's been truly beautiful. Yeah, it truly has. Truly has. There you have, folks. Have a wonderful day. God bless. I love all y'all, and we'll see you around.